Hi, I'm Matt Allen, editor of DadsDivorce.com, and on today's Dad's Divorce Live, I'll be talking with radio commentator and author Jessica Bram. Jessica has written a book called Happily Ever After Divorce, Notes of a Joyful Journey about Surviving a Divorce and Thriving After It. You can find out more information about Jessica and her book at happilyeverafterdivorce.com. So Jessica, thanks for joining us.
Well, it's my pleasure.
First, let's start with some background. Obviously, you went through a divorce, but what compelled you to write about your experience and share it with the world?
Well, as a writer and a personal essay writer, I always have been writing about things that I've been going through as I've gone through them. And this particular experience of going through a divorce with 3 young children had so much to learn and so much to discover that was really not what I had expected, and that I realized that really every one of these things that I write about in the book, each one of them it's actually a collection of personal essays where I talk on a lot of different topics, had its own kind of revelation and discovery in it, and it just seemed like that it was what I was thinking about and living through, and I would in the end have a really positive message to share with people, which was that it was not the horror that I expected it to be when all was said and done.
What perhaps surprised you the most about the process or what you learned from it?
I really expected the worst. You know, I read about in the book that I was a child of divorce myself back when they really did not know how to protect children, number one. Number two, when fathers tended to just disappear in a divorce. So a divorce equated automatically to absent father. And I always felt, especially since I had 3 little boys, that the last thing I would ever do was ever submit my children to a divorce, even if it meant being unhappily married for the rest of my life.
Right.
And so I was determined to stay married. But, you know, what we decide is going to happen is not always what happens. And the big surprise for me was that, yes, it was difficult. The process, there's no question, is difficult. But the life that my boys and I put together afterward was really a really good one, and that their father was not absent, that there was a lot that I could do that could promote his connection to them, that they stayed connected to both of us, and that was a complete change from what I had grown up with. And I thought that there was really a message that I wanted to share in that it does not have to be the end of the world, and it can be done very differently than the way people, I think, often assume it's done.
Right. So let's talk about moving on after a divorce. One of the excerpts from your book I read was about the light bulb problem, where it seemed like after you were divorced and your husband moved out, you're always having to change the light bulbs or other chores you had never done or even thought of doing, or suddenly you had to do them. And for our dads out there, it's probably along the same lines of having to braid their daughter's hair for the first time, or fix school lunches, or just small tasks that you never really thought about doing until you were sort of a single parent. So how do you get beyond this adjustment phase and what you described in your book as sort of the light bulb problem?
Well, the reason I wrote a piece about it was I think it's more of an emotional adjustment than anything else. Obviously, anybody could change a light bulb.
Yeah, right.
Obviously, when I refer to the light bulbs in a sort of metaphorical way,
Right.
that suddenly, when the bulbs blew in the house, which they didn't get changed automatically. And as you're saying, I think those are great examples about braiding hair or making lunches. Like, well, school lunches just make themselves, or doctor's appointments or whatever.
Right.
So it was more of a kind of a psychological change than when I had to kind of realize, well, wait a minute, this is my responsibility now, and he's not around to do this for me anymore. And when it took a moment of, taking a deep breath and thinking, well, what do I have to do to figure out, how you get a bulb into a really complicated outdoor lantern, or what do they really put under the counters, And I realized I could learn, and I could go to hardware stores, and I could ask the guys, could you show me how to get, do these things? Then I had a new feeling of confidence, and I felt so much more optimistic. So, it's not really the light bulb itself that's the issue. It's the coming to an understanding in a very positive way that, I'm smart. I can learn something new that I haven't done before, and learning that I can cope. So, of course, in the end, it's really a metaphor about coping.
Right. So are there, certain steps you need to take in that process?
Well, the reason I wrote the book in particular is because one of the things that helped me the most was just hearing stories of other people who went through it and asking them, well, how did you get through it?
Right.
What was it like for you? And frankly, that's one of my main motivations for writing the book, and the why it was written the way it was. The book, Happily Ever After Divorce, is not a how-to that tells you what to do or how to do it. It's just, let me tell you what it was like for me when I was taking my kids on a vacation by myself, and I had all the responsibility, and I had to lug the suitcases, and it was one parent instead of two, and just sharing my stories and sharing honestly what some of the hard things were, and then giving the message that but you know what, we got through it. My kids learned how to help in a way that they hadn't before, and I got a lot of positive messages from friends who had been through it, and I saw them thriving and doing well. And that's exactly what I tried to do in the stories that I wrote in the book. So, as I think that going to friends or reading my book is a good way to start to get through it and to think, I think I can handle this too.
You also write about the stigma that comes along with being divorced, as if you're sort of branded with this word and it follows you everywhere. People whisper divorce or constantly say how sorry they are for you, things like that. So how can you overcome this negative association that society gives to someone who is divorced?
Divorce is always going to be regarded as a loss, and it is in a way, and it's certainly a loss for children who have one life that they now have to replace with another, or it's initially a loss, and I think people will always have that kind of initial reaction. But in terms of overcoming the stigma, I think the best thing that I could do was to present to the world the image of a happy, coping parent who was handling things as they came along and putting the needs of the children first, and presenting to the world that we're okay here, not moaning and groaning. I think part of the problem might be the stigma comes from the fact that maybe divorced people might feel a little bit too open sometimes about venting about their ex-spouses, and I really think that it's our responsibility to put an end to that and to present an image of acceptance and dignity and moving on.
Well, finally, what do you hope people will get out of your book?
I hope that they'll get a sense of hope and optimism. When you're in the middle of a really tough time, it's very common to think it's always going to be this way. And I want to give people a hope of the possibility of change, and that they'll recognize, I write in the book, one slogan that helped me the most was, "This too shall pass," and that the way things are today is not the way that they're going to be in the future, and things will improve and will get better. And in fact, in my case, I found love again, and I just remarried after 15 years of divorce, just a few months later, just a few months ago. And I want to give people hope that a brighter future awaits. It's as simple as that.
Great. Well, congratulations on your marriage and best of luck with your book.
Thank you so much.
That was Jessica Bram, the author of Happily Ever After Divorce. You can find out more information about Jessica and her book at happilyeverafterdivorce.com. That'll do it for this edition of Dad's Divorce Live. I'm Matt Allen, editor of DadsDivorce.com. We'll see you next time.